This episode of GatherGeeks is sponsored by BrandLive. Virtual shouldn't mean second rate. Your special events deserve a special stage no matter the format. BrandLive has supported thousands of events, huge stars, millions of guests, and the President of the United States. Make your whole team happy. Give presenters confidence, blow your audience away, and nail that run of show. With dedicated event support and the tools you need to be an event superhero. Visit brandlive.com to learn more.
Are you
Okay, so we're gonna probably add.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
I'm thrilled today to welcome my friends Denzil Rankine and Marco Giberti, who are the authors of the new book called Reinventing Live, the always-on future of events. If you are part of the future of live events in any way, I urge you not only to listen to this podcast, but get the book. Denzil and Marco will challenge everything about what was and will set you on the path to what will be. You will learn that if you are to survive as an enterprise, we are not really in the event industry anymore, but we are the catalyst for the industries that we serve all year round. Take a listen, take notes, and then take action as soon as you finish the podcast.
The first question before we get into the book, which I thought was fantastic, was your predictions of when are we going to get back to normal? What do you think about it as of this moment? Because it changes every single day. Marco, do you want to start?
Yeah, honestly, the honest answer is I don't know. But I keep tracking stats and research. I saw one that they did on the Event Manager blog last week, and it was mostly Q4 2021, Q1 2022. But as this is changing on a daily basis, which means my recommendation is always let's be prepared for the worst and pray for the best in terms of if events comes back earlier, fantastic, but there's a serious chance that at least big events, big trade shows, they're going to take a while.
Denzil?
I agree. No one really knows. And that's why actually my company launched the recovery tracker. And that's aimed at the financial community and also organizers want a view of what this recovery is, because there's so much disparate information and it's such a patchy recovery. No one can actually see what's happening. And at the moment, it looks like around the world, the prediction is for the next months, we're going to be operating at kind of 50% of where we were. And I agree with Marco, yeah, maybe it's going to be next year. But I'm also going to pick you up on the word normal. What do you mean by normal? Because people talk about a new normal. And what we're going to see is we're going to see events coming back and we're going to have a regular cycle of events. But the winners are going to be doing things differently. And I guess that's what the book's all about.
Now, the title of the book is Reinventing Live, the always-on future of events. Now, one thing I know is when people do titles, they really want to figure out how to telegraph what you're talking about. What is your sort of blink analysis? What would be my blink analysis of what that means? What do you want me to think?
Look, from my perspective is the fact that a 2 or 3 days event is no longer relevant. And we need to think from a different angle and incorporate the events as part of a year-long marketing strategy. That's my reading on the title and the key messages that we're trying to share.
Until you guys have debated this.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. It takes a bit of effort to get to it. Reinventing is a really important word. So I think there are quite a lot of people who would hope that we can just get back to normal. We could just go and run events again like we used to. That word reinventing is what we lead with, of saying you need to do things differently. But we absolutely believe that face-to-face is going to come back. So reinventing live is saying, yeah, live is going to come back, but it has to be different. And then always on, that's your 365. And digital is everything encompassing it. Have all these different words kicking around, virtual, hybrid, and so on. It's all essentially a set of digital tools that we're looking at.
So how much time as a book person, how much time did you spend talking about that line?
I can tell you one thing about Marco. He's incredibly efficient to work with when it comes to things like that. So we have a brainstorm, we get on with it, we write down ideas, and then you come back to it and you say, oh, actually, that one's nailing it. Done.
What were the alternatives?
Oh, we had a long list, and it was a painful exercise for me, honestly. I'm an anxious guy, and I was trying to find the perfect title and tagline. But in any case, I think that what we're trying to say, and we're more than happy with people arguing with us and sharing their own views, is that we believe that probably the next 10 or 20 years for the live events industry is going to showcase more changes than the previous 500 years combined. And as guys that were around for quite a long time, Denzil 30 plus years, I'm 25 plus years around live events in different angles. In my case, as a show operator, and after that, as an investor in events and events technology. We wanted to share our own views and hopefully help some leaders and people in our industry to navigate those changes on an efficient way. That was in some way our initial thesis when we decided to start this journey.
Before we jump into some of the things that you're talking about in the book, I want you to give us a context of when you say live, reinventing live. After 9/11 happened in New York, and I was very active in helping to bring back the city. And we were dealing with sort of the event stuff and the meeting stuff. And then all of a sudden, NYC & Company, which is the CVB, starts talking the numbers for the exhibition industry, and it dwarfed everything else. And one of the things people don't understand is how big that part of the industry is. Can you give us a context of where the exhibition industry fits into the whole event world? Who wants to take that?
I guess I have to take it. Trying to define that is very tricky because there's so much overlap between different event types. The global exhibition industry is worth around $30 billion, or it was in 2019. But then events, of course, is so much broader when you move into meetings, conferences, you're in the B2b arena, and then you get into the more prosumer arena, and then you get into consumer events. So the numbers just scale up. And the other thing which I think you're referring to is the economic impact of events is absolutely staggering, with a very significant multiplier. And I think there are quite a few voices in the industry now saying we need to actually have better advocacy, and we need to have a stronger voice because the scale of the economic impact is so great. It's actually a meaningful part of GDP. But I'm not going to throw around any more numbers.
But all I do know is that when you look at the difference, and you look at the scale, the economic impact of exhibitions when it comes to a community is far larger and identifiable than other aspects of the industry. And it all morphs together between conferences and things like that too. So what is an exhibition anymore? It's completely, what's a convention? That we don't even use that word anymore.
But the number that I can share, which is a number that I keep seeing in every single investor deck for events or events technology, our economic impact, it's a $2.7 or $2.5 trillion from one research a couple of years ago. The honest answer is I don't know, because if you combine events, as Denzil said, in different verticals, sports, music, festivals, you name it, it's immense. Which means if someone in your audience knows the real number, please reach out, because it's a key question that every single investor wants to understand in terms of how big is the universe of the potential impact for the live events industry. And it's still today, for me, it's a mystery.
One of the things that you use in your book a lot is the word TAM. And it's a big investor word, but if you leave the investor world, no one knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, let me translate that because it's probably my fault. When you're looking as a potential investment or advisory deal, one of your first questions is how big is TAM? And every single tech entrepreneur will answer the question right away. TAM is the total addressable market for that particular investment opportunity. And it's a big number because, of course, if the TAM is small, investors basically run away because they want to invest in big problems and big opportunities. And again, the TAM in the live events industry is massive. It was massive before COVID, and we believe that it's going to be way bigger after COVID because we are adding the virtual events component, which is now a real business growing extremely fast during the last 12 months, and it's not going away. It's probably going to slow down or be different, but now we all know that we can meet online and have conversations that are relevant and learn and access to content, which means that is increasing TAM for live events dramatically, which I think that is fantastic news for those organizers who are brave enough in terms of rethinking their business model.
So when you start a new trade show, like I'm an entrepreneur, we're all entrepreneurs here. Are we looking for, it looks like it's shifting. Like when you do your own TAM, some of it, you want to go deeper rather than bigger in many cases, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. As David, I spent 10 plus years with REIT exhibitions. And actually, Denzil was responsible for that because he did the due diligence for REIT, representing REIT before they invested in my company 20 plus years ago. And I remember those painful launch meetings where I need to convince someone on a board level to launch a show. And the key question is, how big is this market? How attractive this trade show could be. And it's not an easy debate. But in any case, right now, it's not only about how big, as you said, it's how deep, how granular we could be on that particular community and how much added value we could add and how much opportunities that will generate from a P&L perspective.
So why don't you go through the before March 14th world, the industry today, and the post-COVID world? Your book goes into a whole thing about 2.0 and 3.0 and all the different new worlds. How do you describe what the world's going to be to another entrepreneur that's sitting in Iowa, let's say, and has a trade show business that's been going for a long time, and now, holy shit, they have to change everything? What advice do you give them based on your book? What should they take away from this great book, by the way?
There's a lot there. So what was the world before? I think Marco and I wanted just to bring out some home truths and say this was a fantastic industry. A lot of people made a lot of money from it, satisfied a lot of customers. However, it was a little bit broken and people were not seeing that and not prepared to see it. It wasn't growing, for example, as fast as digital. Customers weren't really particularly happy. We could operate as like mini monopolies. There are a whole set of things that just weren't perfect, but it was a great money-making machine. And along comes a crisis that's going to change everything. This crisis also just stopped everything. So our initial comment is the fundamental need for people to interact face-to-face and to do business and so on will continue, but things weren't being done as well as they should. So what is the advice for the future? I'll say a couple of things that I'm sure Marco will come in and add to them. Number one, I'm sorry to say that about half of the people who were in this industry will probably struggle to be really successful in the future. That's because you need a new mindset, and that's about customer first, understanding customers, not operations or just selling. And you've got to have a digital mindset because we need to be joined up, whether it's through a B2b platform or the use of digital tools. So that's a different animal is needed to be involved in this environment. And that's going to involve flexibility and really understanding customer needs. So there are a few. Marco, do you want to pick up and add some more?
Yeah, I keep saying that if I could share feedback with any show director or team, I am a big Star Wars fan. And I keep saying a phrase from Yoda when he was training Luke Skywalker. He said, you have to unlearn and learn again. And I keep thinking that phrase is very relevant for our industry because we need to unlearn many of the things that they were successful in the past are no longer going to be successful in the future. And what Denzil said is true. If you see an industry like ours, with an exhibitor NPS of -17 and visitor NPS of 5,
Can you explain what that means to people that don't know?
Yeah, it's basically how happy are exhibitors or visitors with their return of investment and experience around live events. It's a tragedy how unhappy both stakeholders are, which means the industry was not doing great from a happiness level from their customers. The industry was doing great from a happiness level from the owners, from the trade show owners that, as Denzil said, they were making a fortune. We were making, I'm one of them. I was lucky to enjoy that beautiful life, which means when you're running a successful business that is growing double digit, that is giving you 30% profit, net profits, and growing nicely, why the hell do you want to complicate your life changing and engaging technology, which is a dark science for many event organizers?
One of the things you said in the book that the exhibitors feel like hostages. That was a very shocking statement. And I agree with it totally, but I've never heard it called that. Explain what that means to people that are listening.
It's really quite bad news. And I think this also can be the case for some of the big exhibitors too. If you're a hostage, it means that you really have got to exhibit at that event. And if you feel that if you don't go, you are making a mistake, because your competitors would all say, oh, that company's not gone, they're not doing so well, or they don't have a new product to launch. So it's, people talk about fear of missing out. It's part of that. And so people feel when they're hostages that they have to go. And sometimes we're talking about spending substantial amounts of money. The other part of it is they're not getting value. Supposing you have to go and you just enjoy it. Maybe some people don't like Las Vegas or whatever, but it makes sense for them to go. Well, fine. The hostage, they don't really want to go, and they think they're wasting their money, but they can't avoid it.
When did that start? When did that flip? Because
I first saw that 15 or 20 years ago.
Yes.
So it is not a brand new concept.
Yes.
That has been around for a while, and we have had a history of trade shows collapsing. A lot of us know the names of shows which have collapsed. We could all name half a dozen of them in the United States. And a large part of that is because the exhibitors felt like hostages, and then they stopped going.
And what did the organizer not do that got you to that place?
Really simple. The organizer did not speak to customers, did not understand customer needs. They just kept selling square feet. They just kept rolling out the same thing with no innovation, because it was such a fantastic money machine, but they didn't see the cliff edge. And when the cliff edge comes, it's really bad. Everyone falls off it. I'm sorry to say that those disasters that we have seen, mostly the result of either lazy management or blind management, or people just not paying attention to customers and giving them what they need.
So let me share 2 cents from the organizer perspective. I remember presenting at UFI. I remember it was UFI is the Global Association for Event Organizers. And it's probably one of the largest conferences in the industry. And I remember it was in Asia. I don't remember how long ago, but at least 8 to 10 years ago. And I presented about tech and how tech could disrupt or help or not events. And one of the slides, I was presenting that some organizers, they were on a denial mode about engaging tech. And I remember that after the presentation, a good friend of mine, which is a CEO from one of the largest event organizers in the world, which I'm not going to name, he said, look, I saw that slide and it's true. But on the other side, why should I complicate my management team and my culture, company culture, and many other things, engage in something that we don't understand when the business is growing double digit and super profitable, and we're living our best time. And I think that he was, I don't know if he was right or not, but he had a solid point, which means this industry was not in crisis in many ways before COVID. This industry was doing pretty good and record settings in many events, which means it's hard to change where things are good, but as we know as entrepreneurs, that's the time when you need to change. Where things are good, you have the ability to change and invest in R&D and place bold bets. Changing in crisis, during crisis, is not that easy because the business is not doing extremely well. But in any case, I think that what Denzil said is absolutely right. It was a combination from not going out of the comfort level, and on the other side, things were going pretty well.
So I want to get into you talk about the 365-day-a-year approach, which kind of sounds like what the magazine and the B2B industry used to be. In fact, I worked with Charlie McCurdy at Primedia. He was the president of Primedia, and he was like, oh my God, we're in this great business. We don't have to deal with editors. We don't have to deal with anything other than the event itself. There's no print on paper. He loved the fundamentals of that business after being in the magazine business so long and understanding how expensive it is to run a 365-day thing with editors who are cranky and have their perspectives and things like that. How do you get to the 365-day-a-year approach without having the dynamics of these reporters and editors and things like that to serve this audience?
I don't know if you can do that perfectly. Obviously, that the world has changed and we have a lot of different approaches through technology. And I would say that the publishing example still rings true to an extent, because we're going to be 365. We are looking at some of those skills, but we're not looking at old-fashioned trade journals. We look at this very differently. And I think we would say that you're looking at this combination of skills of the event organizer should now be a community catalyst, and they should consider themselves to be in a leadership position in their industry. So if you ask them at some barbecue, what do you do? They won't say, oh, I work for an event organizer. They'll say, oh, I work in the automotive industry, or I work in the aerospace industry, or whatever. And they would have a leading role, and they might bring in an association. They might have a relationship with an association that's going to be providing some of that. You might have a relationship with the modern version of a business publisher, and you don't necessarily have to own that skill. But what you want to do is coordinate that as a community catalyst. And we're going to find partnerships of all different varieties springing up. And then underlying this, we've got what we call the B2b platform. And that's a slightly annoying term because it's difficult to really define that perfectly, but it's really a digital method of communication. Ultimately, it could be a marketplace, or it could also be something which is closer to the business publisher that you've described. But that's going to be in the partnership as well. So I would say, as a former event organizer, you want to be a community catalyst, and just a brand manager pulls strings, has the right relationships and so on. That's what you're going to do. Bring together the right relationships in order to serve that community. You don't necessarily have to own it or do it all yourself.
Marco, any comments on that?
No, I totally agree. And I think that the honest question that every single event person should ask is, which are my core skills? And if your core skills are traditional event organizing skills, which, as Denzil said, is 50+% of the talent around our industry, you have two choices. Again, and learn again. You need to reinvent yourself as a professional in this industry, or you need to partner with someone else who can complement your skills. In this case, in many cases, is digital players. And we're starting to see those partnerships. You mentioned Charlie, one of the smartest guys in this industry. He runs Informa now. He did a partnership with New Order on the fashion industry. New Order is a B2B marketplace on that industry. And Informa here in US, Nancy Walsh, another super smart person in our industry, an ex-read and friend, she's running a portfolio of fashion events on that particular industry. Are those partnerships going to be successful in the long term? Who knows? But at least they're both learning a lot on those experiments. And you have to be brave and recognize that if you run a trade show company, it's not going to be easy building a digital B2B platform, and you probably need help or a partner. And on the other side, as I spend a lot of time talking with geeks, with software guys, they think that running events, it's easy. As soon as they try, they say, oh, these are event organizers, they're not so stupid. This is not as easy as I thought, which means there are lessons and opportunities on both sides. And I think that partnerships is one of the massive opportunities for our industry. And there is another problem, which is if you're running a public company in the event space or a private equity-owned company, you need to reinvent your business model, because there is a serious chance that those acquisition multiples are not coming back super fast, and investors are going to look at different revenue split, which is something that we cover in the book a lot. Is your revenue split used to be sponsorships and exhibit space. It's probably going to look different in the future, and digital will play a significant role. We did a quick poll the other day in one presentation with event organizers, asking them, which is your revenue, digital revenue pre-COVID, and the numbers were around 2%. And after that, we asked them, which is going to be your digital revenue in a couple of years? And the answer was 10 to 20%. And in 5 years, it was 20 plus, 30, close to 30%, if I remember, which means we're talking about billions of dollars moving from traditional exhibition or events revenue, sponsorships or exhibit space, to digital, billions and billions of dollars.
So let me push back on the digital revenue piece. How much of that digital revenue is moving the sponsorship dollars from live to digital, and how much of it is from the attendee? Like in magazines, we started charging more for the user to get the news or get the information. Where's the split now happening on digital? Because it's still the same pool.
That's a fantastic question, and I don't know the answer, but I have some initial thoughts. One of the things that we mentioned in the book is leads as a service. Are you familiar with software as a service? It's a massive category growing for the last 10 plus years and extremely successful. Can we create as an events industry, a leads as a service model where our customers, in this case, brands, exhibitors, are getting leads on a regular basis through our digital platforms and live events? Is that possible? Some smart entrepreneurs believe that it is, and they're starting to create revenue models that looks more like a software as a service model where they charge an annual fee to both sides of the marketplace, to buyers and sellers. And that annual fee, in the case of sellers, exhibitors, includes physical space, as in the old good days, but also digital activation, lead activation on a year-long basis. And to the buyer includes the conference ticket, the show ticket, and access to content on a regular basis and potential connection through a platform. That's the model that is interesting, exciting, and accelerating like never before during COVID. And that's probably a potential opportunity for the future.
But what happens, I've been in these lead things where you go lead, 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 and then you use up all of the leads in your company and they don't need you anymore. How do you go into that? Because it's not a never-ending pool in your niche.
Yeah,
Yes.
but we've seen that in the publishing world, where databases have just been pushed to death. But in the events arena, we haven't seen that. We've seen that they've actually managed to manage that lead process much more effectively. So I think that the big warning call is don't just get a database and then murder it and spam it to death. And when we're talking about being a community catalyst, we're talking about serving that industry with its needs, not spamming it.
I built my whole business, BizBash, based on all the fundamentals you're talking about. And I view my world as I'm the mayor of my niche. And I do everything possible. And then I'm not an event organizer, I'm a collaboration artist. And I'm bringing people together for the service of that industry, as opposed to just sort of getting everything I can out of it. And I think that is the model.
Your application for a case study in the second edition has just been accepted.
It is the multiple revenue streams, caring about the audience. And I grew up in Washington, so I use the political model more than I use anything else. In fact, I've always used the constituency first model in everything I've done. And I think you talk about customer first. How do you actually research? What's the best way of researching what the customer wants? How do you ask?
Wow, well, you've nailed it by saying you ask them. And it is shocking how many people do not actually ask customers questions. They sit in a meeting room and they assume they know the answer. So I'm old enough to have started when there wasn't any internet, and I started life asking customers questions, cheeky and pertinent questions by visiting them or telephoning them. So that remains the fundamental thing. But of course, now we've got data.
Denzil, what is the first, when you did that by hand, what were the one or two first questions that you used to get real data out of people? Like, what's the probing question?
Oh, if you're thinking about events, there's only one question you need to ask an attendee. And that is, why did you not sleep last night? Because if you can figure out why that attendee did not sleep, why they're not going to get their bonus, why they're going to get fired, how they're going to have to work on the weekend and they didn't want to, or whatever it is, if you can get to that, you simply say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. attendee, here is the solution for it, whether it's an engineering solution, a product solution, or whatever. So you figure out why they don't sleep, and then you give them a solution to it. That's the fundamental question. I read that in the book, and I thought, wow, that's the T-shirt.
Yeah, but let's analyze the opportunity that tech brings to the table. Denzil just said could be scalable through technology. And we can capture today amazing data, and we can move into a lead qualification model that was not easy to do only 10 years ago, which means, going back to your previous question, I hope that the events industry will do a fantastic job on lead qualification. And lead qualification could start with an email or a poll, could follow with a virtual meeting. Virtual meetings, David, are exploding. And some technology companies are capitalizing that opportunity to put a buyer and seller together on a virtual meeting first, in preparation for a face-to-face meeting or product demo after that, which means if we do a good job as an industry on lead qualification, it's not going to be about the quantity, it's going to be about the quality on those leads. that they're going to trigger transactions. And that's the magic word, because sellers will pay whatever you ask them if you bring the right leads at the right time with the right business model. And I was selling events for a couple of decades. Sellers will pay whatever you ask them if you bring quality. Sellers will hate you if you bring quantity, but the quality is not there. And now technology, I believe that technology will crack the code in many areas like matchmaking or digital platforms or proximity. Proximity is a massive area for face-to-face events, and technology will improve the quality on those leads and the way that people meet and close business.
So the question I have in terms of, we have all these hardcore solutions that are antiseptic in a sense. How do you, and my feeling is the one thing that I found about every time I give a lecture on events, I come down to the Maya Angelou quote that people don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. How do you scale intimacy when you do the one-on-ones? And how do you make people connect in emotional ways? And is that important or not? Or am I just like...
It's critically important. It's a fantastic question. Let me start with the classic answer that I'm giving these days, comparing Tinder with real sex. If you just apply technology on a Tinder basis and do matchmaking and connecting this buyer with seller, you're missing the real thing, which is the trust that is going to be generated on that face-to-face meeting. And as an industry, that's part of our magic recipe. We're selling trust. We're selling a relationship. We're selling a connection that is quite unique in comparison with any other marketing tool. I honestly think that we shouldn't be naive thinking that Tinder is real sex. Tinder is a lead qualification for potential relationships. And B2B, I keep joking, I'm an investor and I was member since day one for 4 or 5 years on a company in London that they do AI matchmaking for the trade show industry initially. And our problem to be fixed during the early days was matchmaking at live events. And after 5 or 6 years around that problem, I realized that it's not as easy as it sounds, because matchmaking with people is or left, hot or not hot, I like it or not, and I can match and I can start a potential conversation or relationship. Matchmaking between buyers and sellers is way more complicated because there are so many different angles and data and timing and things like that, which means that's one of the potential issues in our industry, is how do we combine tech with the real thing on a way that the buyers and sellers will be having a different NPS in 10 years, and buyers and sellers will be saying, you know what, this is fantastic investment of my time and money.
So you talk about database thinking and what people really want, what they don't. If you're an event organizer and you get all this data, how do you make the decision? Do you trust any part of your gut anymore? Or how do you balance the gut with the data?
I think you're going to find that businesses are increasingly data-led in their decisions. And you go outside of the events industry and you look into other industries, you have some which really rely on data more than anything else. And so if you look at dunnhumby and the club card from Tesco, they just created billions of value through customer data. So customer data is going to be incredibly important. In the events industry, which is quite parochial by comparison, with small events, that hasn't been necessary. Someone who is the mayor of their community kind of knows everyone and doesn't need the data. But when we scale this and you want to be the event for the region or even the world, you're going to be driving this through data. And those data decisions that Marco set out, they're absolutely correct. And it is more complicated than Tinder. But we are only going to see substantial improvements as we have in the use of consumer data. We're just going to see one improvement after the other. And when we can get to the point of being better at spotting purchasing intent and what that intent is for, it's all going to improve. In 5 years' time, we'll look back and say, oh my goodness, this matchmaking today was just so naive compared to what it's going to be.
So what's the Iowa event organizer looking at the data? What does he look at first and what's most important? What you said, the question about sleeping at night, what is the most important data point that you should be looking at?
But I think you said before, it's not about data from a technical perspective. It's about your own knowledge on that particular industry. If you think that you are going to be a successful organizer just on a technical way handling data, I think that is not enough. It's the combination between data analysis and data intelligence plus your own knowledge on that, your and your team knowledge on that particular industry. As Denzil said before, I remember show directors saying, which is your job? I'm an event organizer. And I remember show directors saying, I work on the aerospace industry. The quality difference on those two specific people was dramatic. The successful one is the second one, who's saying, I'm a part of an industry. I understand this industry. I have a voice. I have an opinion. And of course, now I can use data as well.
But you vote with your attendance in today's data. And most people are like, okay, this year's show did X and next year's show went down 30%. Oh my God, we got a problem.
I disagree.
Okay, good.
It could be fantastic for your show to be down 30%. I remember I ran a workshop a few years ago with a bunch of industry leaders. And I said, okay, who's made their show smaller? And almost everyone put their hand up to say, at some stage, I've made a show smaller. And one guy said, yeah, our biggest show, I can't remember, it was $20 or $30 million. It said we halved the number of attendees. And he said, well, actually, we probably overcooked it a little bit. But when we halved the number of attendees, satisfaction went up because we had all those wrong people there who were just on the day out. We didn't need them. They were getting in the way. They were annoying everyone else. So if you just say down 30%, I'm going to challenge you and say, maybe that's a nightmare, or maybe it's really smart. So this question of what do you look for? Get the right audience, qualify them, make sure you take them on the right journey to get to the event. And then don't have too many, have the right people and everyone's going to be happy.
Let's go through, Marco, do you have something else?
No, I remember my early days launching tech shows, sold out day one, and tried to squeeze as much money as we can after that without thinking the quality on the buyer experience. Those days are over, which means right now, sometimes you need to slow down, reduce the show, focus on quality, and you can grow after that, probably after a couple of years. But we saw many amazing global brands around events dying because of maximizing profits or because of not giving enough added value to their customers. I think that small organizers learn some valuable lessons with that, and they're going to rethink before growing too fast, too soon.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor, BrandLive. There are so many virtual events platforms out there. Which one is right for you? How about the one that makes planning your next super important, stress-inducing, virtual event easy, or even fun? Since 2010, BrandLive has supported thousands of events, millions of guests, and huge stars, including the President of the United States. With dedicated event support and the tools you need to be an event superhero, visit brandlive.com to learn more.
Let's go through a few of the winners and the losers. I know you, in part of your book, you have that. Who are the winners and the losers in the new world? You want to start with organizers?
Well, I can tell you who some of the winners are.
Yeah, who are the winners?
It's been, I think, a surprise to a number of people that what we're seeing are these one-to-one meetings where you have specifically organized meetings around a topic. There's a buyer who particularly has a problem because they have $500,000 to spend on an IT system and they don't know how to do it correctly and so on. They need to meet exactly the right vendors. And so that's an example of one-to-one. You have others in travel and so on. That sector has done really well. And they have found that people are able to connect through video meetings. And if you put the right people together, they're getting really surprisingly good results. And so those are winners because actually the cost of organizing has gone down. There isn't quite the same level of travel. I don't think we're going to say that entire face-to-face sector is going to be wiped out, but they've found there is another way. So we're going to have the new world. There's going to be a mix. I would say in that area, we've actually got some winners who've come out of the crisis.
Marco, do you want to talk about venues? I know that we've talked about this in the past.
Jesus, it's a painful category at the moment. I think that venues, again, we'll need to learn in many ways and invest in different areas where the organizer and the visitor will demand a different experience. And it's not easy. because there's a lot of hardware investment, tech investment that is expensive and difficult to monetize. But if they don't do that, they're going to lose future opportunities, because the good organizers, they're going to need good and tech-enabled venues, which means I believe that venues could and should monetize new opportunities, but they will need to invest in order to do that. As David, every single organizer now wants a TV studio as part of the venue experience, because they want to broadcast hybrid content through virtual at the show. Which venues are going to do that? Okay, the venues that are going to invest in those sort of tools, they're probably going to capture loyalty from some next generation organizers. The venue who said, you know what, do it on your own, good luck, probably they're going to suffer. I think that, and again, I assume that your audience is mostly US based. Correct me if that's not the case. The difference with Europe, countries like Germany, when you have the model on both sides, you have venues who owns events, is not very relevant here in US, which means if you're a venue and you're trying to reinvent your business, you will need to engage tech like never before. And I was talking about proximity. Let me translate this. And if I go too geek, stop me. But when you're inside a big convention center, one of the problems is, how do I know that David is only 10 meters away from me and he could be interested to have a meeting with me because he's selling what I'm buying? Proximity is a massive problem. In order to do that, at the moment, you need sensors inside the venue that allows your mobile apps or whatever technology do you want to use to connect and share that proximity. We did a couple of experiments on that model using mobile apps and sensors inside venues, and in small shows, we're generating thousands of incremental meetings that they were not there before.
That's interesting.
Now, if the venue helps and they have sensors on a permanent basis, the costs go down dramatically. Are venues going to do that or not? I'm very excited, because if venues are tech ready, the new opportunities for buyers and sellers to connect are very exciting. But again, we need help from the venue, we need help from the organizer, and of course, we need help from the tech guys.
You also mentioned to me a few weeks back how the footprint of these large convention centers are at risk, because there's a whole new dynamic of making events smaller and making more money on the virtual side. Do you want to discuss that? I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think that for years I'm hearing nobody wants more events or bigger events. They want better events, more efficient events, which means if you listen to sellers and buyers, exhibitors and visitors on that model, and again, you can be on a denial mode as an organizer, says, yes, I'm listening, but I don't care. If I can do a bigger show and make more money, I'm happy with that. Or you can think, how can I change the model into smaller events, curated events, probably more expensive events, but also more successful and better NPS. And I think that if you're a venue, in some way, you're in the real estate business because you need to sell space. Now, the question for the future is how many shows are going to keep demanding more space instead of more technology-enabled solutions that allows them to monetize on a different way. And I believe that we're probably going to see less events requiring more space, because very few events, and Denzil probably knows this way better than me, are venue bound. I don't know which percentage of the industry right now is venue bound, but it's a very small number. Is that right, Denzil?
Yeah, it's small. Yeah.
Which means you need to rethink the model as a venue as well. I said, okay, I need to maximize my space because it's still a very relevant part of my business. Plus, how can I monetize tech on a way that my customers are happier, they're more loyal, and their customers are also engaged and excited with the overall event experience?
Do you think that the corporate event side, like, is Dreamforce still going to have 200,000 people coming to it? Or is that completely a day gone by, an era gone by?
That's a fantastic question. And my initial reaction, I split the world of event organizers in two. The event organizers who run events for a profit, the Read or Informas of this world, or many associations that they need to make money with their events, and the event organizers who are running events for marketing purposes, like the Dreamforce of this world. On that category, the pressure for profit is completely different, which means it's pressure for return of investment for their own brand and their partners. I think that those guys, number one, many of them are super smart, and we talk with some of them as part of our book research. And they're thinking, do I really need to have 70,000 people in San Francisco during that week? Or I probably need 30,000 people on a super VIP experience and 2 million people joining online. And they know how to do that, which means I think that there is a potential investment split that is different in the future, because they can maximize, again, their TAM through digital and maximize the return on investment face-to-face, curating the audience that really makes sense for that particular week in San Francisco. That's my initial reaction. Time will tell, but I think that corporate events will continue to be a massive category in our industry, but probably the investment allocation is going to look a little bit different in the future.
But their reach and their effectiveness is going to be the same or perhaps improved if you look at the model that Marco is setting out. So there are quite a lot of parallels with the other events, but I've just underlined the point about these guys don't need to make a profit. To a certain extent, it's customer entertainment, and in some ways it's where the ecosystem gets together. So we're going to see similar trends, but they're going to be under less financial pressure.
I wrote a piece on the hub and spoke method of how you're able to have thousands of people attend, but create smaller pods. Is that something that you see happening?
Yes.
There will be elements of that we're going to see come out in certain industries and in certain ways. Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look towards Europe, Germany has these major venues, and they are used to Lufthansa or whoever just bringing people across continents to come into these meetings or trade shows. And there's a very strong sentiment that we're just not going to have that level of intercontinental travel. And they've already done quite a lot of what's called geo-cloning. So whether it's Frankfurt or Cologne or wherever, you have the mothership, and then you have brands elsewhere with satellite events. This is going to be reorganized to a certain extent. And we are going to have some of this hub and spoke that you're talking about.
Do you think that Marco and I have been talking for years about Magic Leap, which is not necessarily the biggest success, but the idea of virtual trade shows that you can multiply all around the world, the same trade show experience, but duplicate it and make it in the hallway of a hotel or something? Is this too Star Warsy, or is this something that could happen?
You've got to go absolutely back to what the human being needs. And you can't just be bedazzled by the technology. So what is that human being trying to do? They're trying to find a new product. They're trying to get a technical solution. Is that going to help them do it? If the answer is yes, it will work. But I think it's a big mistake just to see a glittering technology and think this is the way everything's going to be done tomorrow. So the answer is partially after some nosebleeds and people have figured it out.
The way that I see it is, if you're a planner or an organizer, you have to really understand your audience and see if they will enjoy a VR, AR, or MR experience from a tech perspective with avatars or stuff like that. And I'm 54 years old. I'm in tech since I'm 18 years old. I started my career in Apple, which means I should have some sort of reasonable education about tech and how tech could help or not. But I struggle with avatars. And for a couple of decades now, I saw Second Life and many other initiatives, and I struggle with avatars. But a couple of months ago, I was talking about a startup with one of my kids. My son, he's 23 years old. And I told him, look at this startup. What do you think? And it was an avatar startup focused on music, on concerts. And he said, this is super cool. I will join a concert on something like that because it's fun. And I can go to the concert with my friends and I could be an avatar or whatever, which means I honestly think that it's going to be related to your own experience and your own culture and age in some way, because young people, they have fun with those sort of experiences that old people like us, probably they have a hard time understanding. I see sports and music taking the lead on VR activations or AR activations. But I also see, and this, David, I invested on an AR startup for events, and we lost our shirts with that experience, because we were naive thinking that brands will invest on 3D inventory for showcasing at trade shows. And still today, I was not able to find a solid solution for that. And still today, I think that it's a massive problem, because if you're going to a construction trade show and you're selling Caterpillar, those massive machines, You can showcase one, but not 10. But AR or VR should help you to showcase product on the floor that it's almost impossible to move because of cost-related things. Nobody, at least that I'm aware, if someone on your audience know, please let me know. Nobody cracked the code on that problem, which is showcasing product through VR at B2B events yet. But someone will, because it's a massive problem, which means everything moves pretty slow in our industry, and it's frustrating for anxious guys like me. But at the end, it happens. And when it happens and it works, it moves really fast.
So on that note, we're about at the end of our time. I know what can move fast: buying the book on Kindle. How do you do it? And how could you, in about 5 seconds, be able to start getting deeper into this, which I could talk all day to you guys?
We have a website called Reinventing Live, and all the information is there. You'll see that it is available on Kindle, and that's via Amazon. There's also, if you want hard copy, Amazon, the publisher, Anthem Press, Barnes & Noble, and others have it. All the information is there on Reinventing Live. Also, we would
reinventinglive.com. We have the .com.
Reinventinglive.com, sorry, yeah. And we want everyone also just to join in with case studies, comments and feedback. Marco and I don't think we're perfect. We know this is a moving feast and we just want to have a discussion. So let's do it through that.
Also, I'd like to recommend anybody that's an educator. This is the best textbook for teaching this next generation about where we are right now and what the future could be. So with that, thank you guys. This has been a total pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.